The gentle hum of the washing machine resonated through the house as I folded the final pieces of laundry. Ryan's football jersey, still slightly damp from the dryer, lay on top of the pile. I ran my fingers over the bright blue and white fabric, tracing the bold number 27 stitched on the back. That was his favorite number, the same one his father had worn during his college football days years ago. Ryan was everything I could have hoped for in a son: strong, committed, and compassionate. At 19, he was thriving as a college athlete, a standout on his university's football team. But more importantly, he was a genuinely good person, someone who carried a quiet confidence and a generous heart wherever he went. Now at 44, life had taken many unexpected turns, leaving Ryan and me to navigate the world together. His father, my ex-husband, had slowly drifted out of our lives when Ryan was still young, and I had taken on both parental roles. While it hadn't always been easy, I wouldn't trade the bond Ryan and I shared for anything. We were a team in every sense of the word. That evening, the aroma of lasagna filled the kitchen as I set the table. Ryan had texted earlier to let me know that practice had run late, so dinner had been kept warm in the oven. When he finally came through the door, his cheeks flushed from the cold, I could see the tiredness in his face. "Hey, Mom," he greeted me, offering a tired but sincere smile. He tossed his duffel bag by the door and headed straight for the kitchen. "Rough practice?" I asked, filling a glass with water for him. "You have no idea," he answered, sinking into a chair. "Coach had us doing drills for hours. I thought my legs were going to give out." I set the lasagna on the table, watching as he served himself a large portion. His appetite never ceased to amaze me. Between practices, games, and training, it felt like I was always in the kitchen preparing something to fuel his boundless energy. "How's the team shaping up for the big game next weekend?" I asked. He nodded between bites. "Pretty solid. We've got a tough lineup this year, but Coach thinks we can pull it off, and I agree." I smiled, leaning my chin on my hand as I listened. Talking football had always come naturally to us. It had been that way since Ryan was old enough to throw a ball. Watching him light up as he talked about plays and strategies was one of my greatest joys. After dinner, Ryan leaned back in his chair and stretched his arms overhead. "Thanks for dinner, Mom. You always know how to hit the spot." "That's what I do," I said with a grin. "But don't think you're off the hook for dishes." He groaned playfully but stood and began collecting the plates. As he moved around the kitchen, his actions were smooth and confident. I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. He had grown into such an amazing young man, and while I like to think I had a hand in that, so much of it was simply who Ryan was at his core. Later that night, as I curled up on the couch with a book, Ryan joined me. He plopped down on the other end, stretching his long legs across the cushions. "Mom," he began, his voice softer now, "do you ever feel like things have changed between us?" I looked up at him, meeting his gaze. "What do you mean?" He shrugged and ran a hand through his messy hair. "I don't know. It's just that we've been through so much together, you and me. And now that I'm older, I see more of how much you've done for me. How much you've sacrificed." I set my book aside and gave him my full attention. "Ryan, raising you has never felt like a sacrifice. Not once. If anything, it's been my greatest joy. I hope you know that." "I do," he said quickly. "But still, I feel like I owe you so much, and I don't think I say thank you enough." My heart softened. "You thank me every day, Ryan, just by being the person you are. That's all I've ever wanted." He leaned his head back against the couch, a small smile tugging at his lips. I want to make you proud." "You already have," I reassured him. "More than you'll ever know." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the sound of the clock ticking in the background. Moments like these, simple and unhurried, were my favorite. They reminded me that even as Ryan forged his own path, we would always share this connection, this unbreakable bond. Eventually, Ryan stood up, stretching again. "I'm going to hit the shower. Thanks for the talk, Mom. I needed that." "Anytime," I said, watching him head upstairs. As I sat alone in the quiet living room, I reflected on our conversation. Ryan's gratitude and love were constant reminders that, despite the challenges, I had done something right. In turn, I silently thanked the universe for giving me a son with a heart as large as his dreams. The sound of the shower running upstairs brought me back to the present, and I smiled to myself. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more laughter, and more shared moments with the person who made everything worthwhile. And for that, I was endlessly grateful. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee filling the house. It was a rare treat. Usually, I was the one up early, bustling around the kitchen while Ryan tried to catch every possible minute of sleep. I slipped on my robe and went downstairs, finding him standing by the counter, his hair still damp from his shower, holding a steaming mug in each hand. "Good morning," he said with an easy, warm smile, offering me one of the cups. "Figured I'd let you sleep in for once." I chuckled, taking the coffee. "You're spoiling me. You know that." "Maybe you deserve to be spoiled," he replied, his tone light but sincere. "You do so much for me. The least I can do is make you coffee." We sat at the kitchen table, the early sunlight streaming through the windows and filling the room with a soft glow. Ryan seemed relaxed, his usual post-practice exhaustion replaced by a lively energy. As we sipped our coffee, he leaned back in his chair and studied me with a look I couldn't quite decipher. "You look nice this morning," he said, his voice carrying a thoughtful undertone. I raised an eyebrow, surprised. "I'm still in my pajamas." He shrugged. "You always look nice, but today especially." "Flattery will get you everywhere," I teased, though his words left a warm feeling in my chest. Ryan smiled and leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I mean it, though. You're incredible, Mom. Beautiful, smart, strong. You're everything I could never hope to be when I'm older." A lump formed in my throat at his unexpected compliment. "That's kind of you to say, Ryan, but you know I'm proud of you for who you are, not who you think you have to become." "Well," he said, grinning, "if I can be half as great as you, I'll be doing pretty well." I shook my head, trying to deflect his praise, but I couldn't ignore how his words made me feel warm inside. Ryan had always been kind, but recently his words seemed to carry a deeper significance, as though he was expressing something beyond simple gratitude. As the days passed, I began noticing more of these moments. Whether it was a casual comment on how I looked in a new top or a thoughtful gesture like filling up my gas tank when he borrowed the car, Ryan's attentiveness seemed to grow in subtle yet unmistakable ways. He had always been affectionate, but now there was a new layer to it, one that made my heart swell and left me feeling both touched and a little unsettled. One evening, while we sat together on the couch watching TV, he suddenly turned to me, his face serious. "You know, Mom, I think you don't give yourself enough credit for everything you do." Surprised, I looked at him. "What do you mean?" "You work so hard, take care of everyone, and still manage to look." "Well, amazing," he said, his cheeks turning pink. "I don't think I've ever told you, but you're kind of my hero." I blinked, taken aback. "Ryan, that's one of the nicest things anyone's ever said to me." He smiled, his gaze steady and sincere. "It's the truth. You're incredible, and I just want you to know how much I appreciate you." "Thank you," I said softly, my voice catching. "That means the world to me." His words stayed with me long after we'd gone to bed. Ryan's kindness and attentiveness overwhelmed me in the best possible way, reminding me of how strong our bond had become over the years. But there was something else, too, something unspoken that I couldn't quite understand. The following weekend, Ryan offered to take me out to dinner, his treat to thank me for everything I'd done for him. He chose a cozy Italian restaurant downtown, a place we hadn't visited in years. As we sat across from one another, the candlelight flickering between us, I couldn't help but marvel at how mature he seemed, how composed and confident he had become. "You know," he said as we waited for dessert, "I think this is the first time we've had a night out like this in a long time, just you and me." "It has been a while," I admitted, "but it's nice." "I'm glad we did this." "Me too," he hesitated, then added, "I hope you know how much you mean to me, Mom, not just as my mom, but as you." Confused, I looked at him, and he nodded. "You're an amazing person, and I don't think I say that enough." For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. The look in his eyes was so sincere, so filled with emotion, that it took my breath away. "Thank you, Ryan. That really means a lot." As we walked back to the car that night, his arm casually draped over my shoulders, I felt a quiet sense of contentment wash over me. Whatever was shifting in our relationship, it was built on a foundation of love and trust, and for that, I was incredibly grateful. Back at home, as I prepared for bed, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. There was a lightness in my expression that I hadn't noticed in years. A quiet happiness that came from knowing I was cherished, not just as a mother, but as a person. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to bask in that feeling. The day of Ryan's big competition finally arrived. The entire week leading up to it, the house had buzzed with a mix of anticipation and nervous energy. Ryan had fully dedicated himself to preparing. spending hours practicing, reviewing strategies, and even fine-tuning his diet to ensure he was in peak condition. Throughout all of this, I had been his cheerleader, supporting him however I could. That morning, I stood by the kitchen counter, packing his favorite snacks into a small cooler. He appeared in the doorway, already dressed in his team uniform, looking every bit the confident young man I had watched grow. "Morning, champ," I greeted him, handing him a bottle of water. "Morning, Mom," he said, offering me a warm smile, though there was a flicker of nerves in his eyes. "You're coming, right?" I gave him a look. "Of course I'm coming. You didn't think I'd miss your big day, did you?" His shoulders relaxed, and he reached out to ruffle my hair playfully. "Good. I don't think I can do this without you." "You can do anything, Ryan," I said, my voice steady. "And I'll be in the stands, cheering you on every step of the way." By the time we arrived at the stadium, the energy was electric. The roar of the crowd, the clamor of teammates, and the adrenaline in the air all combined to create an atmosphere so charged it made my heart race. I found a seat near the front, clutching my bag tightly as I waited for the game to begin. When Ryan's team ran onto the field, the crowd erupted in cheers. My eyes were locked on him, watching how he carried himself with such confidence and determination. Seeing him play was like watching years of hard work come to life. Every pass, every tackle, every strategic move a testament to his dedication. As the game progressed, the score stayed close, with both teams battling fiercely for dominance. Ryan was everywhere on the field, his presence commanding and unwavering. With each play, I felt a surge of pride that almost brought tears to my eyes. When the final whistle blew, signaling their hard-fought victory, I couldn't contain my excitement. I was on my feet, cheering louder than anyone else, my heart swelling with joy. Afterward, the team was swarmed by fans and well-wishers, but Ryan made a beeline straight for me. He was sweaty, his hair sticking to his forehead, but the grin on his face was brighter than the stadium lights. "You were amazing," I exclaimed, pulling him into a tight hug. "Thanks, Mom," he said, his voice muffled against my shoulder. "But I couldn't have done it without you." We headed home after the celebrations wound down, both of us still on a high from his victory. Ryan seemed quieter than usual during the drive, his gaze distant as he stared out the window. I chalked it up to tiredness, assuming he was just processing the day's events. That evening, as we sat on the couch with cups of tea, the silence between us became heavier. Finally, Ryan set his mug down and turned to face me, his expression serious. "Mom," he began, his voice soft but steady, "there's something I need to tell you." I tilted my head, a flicker of worry rising in my chest. "What is it, sweetheart?" He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I don't know how to say it without sounding ridiculous." "You can tell me anything," I assured him, though my heart began to race. He took a deep breath, his eyes locking onto mine. "I love you, Mom. Not just as my mom, but as you, as the person you are." The words hung in the air, heavy and startling. My mind raced, trying to process what he had just said. "Ryan," I began, my voice barely above a whisper, "what are you saying?" "I'm saying," he continued, his tone sincere, "that you mean everything to me. You're kind, strong, beautiful. You've been there for me in ways no one else has, and I don't know when it happened. But I realize that my feelings for you are deeper than they should be." I stared at him, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely think. His eyes were filled with vulnerability, a look I rarely saw, and it left me breathless. "I know this probably sounds crazy," he added quickly, his words tumbling out in a rush. "But I had to tell you. I couldn't keep it inside anymore." "Ryan," I said, reaching for his hand, "this is a lot to take in." "I know," he said, his grip tightening around mine. "I don't expect you to feel the same way. I needed you to know." I took a deep breath, my mind swirling with emotions I couldn't fully name. "You mean so much to me, Ryan, and I'm so grateful for the bond we share, but this is complicated." He nodded, his expression a mix of hope and resignation. "I understand. I just didn't want to hide how I feel anymore." In the quiet that followed, I realized the depth of Ryan's courage in confessing something so profound. And while I wasn't sure where this revelation would take us, one thing was certain. Our connection was unbreakable, grounded in a love that had endured all the challenges life had thrown our way. The house was silent after Ryan's heartfelt confession, the only sound the soft hum of the heater keeping the evening chill at bay. I sat on the couch, my mind filled with emotions and unanswered questions. Ryan had retreated to his room to shower, leaving me to process everything. His words echoed in my mind, a mix of tenderness and weight. When he returned downstairs, his damp hair falling over his forehead, he seemed more at ease. The tension that had marked his face earlier had softened, though there was still a quiet intensity in his eyes. "You okay?" I asked gently, breaking the silence. "Yeah," he said, nodding. "I feel lighter, I guess. Like I finally said something I've been holding on to for a long time." I managed a small smile and placed a hand on his arm. "I'm glad you felt like you could share that with me. It means a lot." Ryan gave me a grateful look before leaning back against the couch. "The game really took it out of me," he said after a moment, flexing his shoulder with a wince. "I'm sore in places I didn't even know could get sore." I chuckled softly. "That's the price of being a star athlete." He grinned, though the smile that followed betrayed the ache in his body. "You know," he said suddenly, his tone light, "we used to take baths together when I was a kid. You'd always say it was the best way to relax after a long day." I raised an eyebrow, amused. "You're not suggesting we relive that, are you?" "Why not?" he replied with a playful shrug. "We're both exhausted. A hot bath could help us both unwind." The suggestion caught me off guard, and for a moment, I wasn't sure how to respond. But before I could, I shook my head, laughing softly. "I think I'll pass on the bath, but I'll tell you what. I've gotten pretty good at giving massages over the years. If your shoulders are bothering you, I could help with that." Ryan's eyes lit up at the offer. "Seriously? That would be amazing. Thanks, Mom. Go grab a towel to lay on," I instructed. "I'll meet you in the living room." While he disappeared upstairs, I prepared some lotion and cleared a space on the floor. When Ryan returned, he spread the towel out and lay face down, resting his head on his folded arms. I couldn't help but smile at how eager he looked, like a child waiting for a treat. Kneeling beside him, I began working on his shoulders, kneading the tight knots that had formed from hours of intense play. Ryan let out a contented sigh, his muscles slowly relaxing under my hands. "You've got magic hands," he murmured, his voice muffled against the towel. I laughed softly. "Years of practice. You're not the first football player I've had to work on, you know?" "Still," he said, turning his head slightly to look at me, "this feels incredible. Thank you, Mom." As I moved down to his lower back, working out the tension there, he glanced up again, his expression soft and affectionate. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "You'd survive," I teased gently, "but I'm glad I can be here for you." When I finished, I patted his shoulder. "There you go, all set. You should feel a little looser now." Ryan sat up, rolling his shoulders and stretching his arms. "I feel like a new man," he said, grinning. Then to my surprise, he leaned in and kissed me on the cheek. "Thanks, Mom. You're the best." The gesture caught me off guard, but it warmed my heart nonetheless. "You're welcome, sweetheart," I said, brushing his hair out of his face. As Ryan gathered the towel and headed upstairs, I sat there for a moment, reflecting on the closeness we shared. His confession earlier had added a new layer to our relationship, one that I was still trying to navigate. But moments like this, simple, loving, and unburdened by complexity, reminded me of the unbreakable bond we had. The bath suggestion might have been playful, but it revealed something I hadn't fully realized until then. Ryan's need for connection ran deeper than I had thought. And while I wasn't sure where this new chapter would lead us, I was certain of one thing. We would face it together, with love and understanding at the heart of everything we did.